I wanted to just present an article with this theme that we've been following for the last week and this week. In schools, it says schools are brainwashing kids to hate America through ethnic studies curricula by Alex Newman. School lessons teaching vitriolic hatred of America, Christianity, and the traditional family, individual liberty, and more are spreading across the country like a deadly cancer. And like cancer, the result will be suffering and death, in particular, death of sanity and civilization among other victims. Under the guise of fighting whiteness, government schools from California to North Carolina and everywhere in between are subjecting the captive children in their care to so-called ethnic studies programs. And these ideological and political brainwashing schemes bring to mind communist re-education programs, critics say. As part of the ethnic studies curricula, children are given classroom instruction on how race, class, gender, sexuality, and citizenship status are tools of oppression, power, and privilege. That's explained by John Morosky in a piece for Real Clear Investigations, blowing the lid off the newest Marxist indoctrination programs to hit the U.S. schools. And during the lessons, Morosky continued, the children are taught colonialism, state violence, racism, intergenerational trauma, heteropatriarchy, and other real and imagined evils are linked together by a common thread: whiteness. And so society must be radically transformed along Soviet lines to deal with it. Of course, all this idiotic to the max, but because children today no longer receive even the basic training in logic and real history, most California kids cannot even read. They have no way of realizing that they are being manipulated and duped. And that's not only kids, most Californians, it says, cannot even read, and they are being manipulated and duped. Instead, the children are unwittingly being weaponized to bring down America, liberty, the church, the family, and even civilization itself, literally. Some of the examples of what passes for ethnic studies can blow your mind, and they show clearly the agenda to use American children to break down society and institutions. Children are ordered to create and organize a systemated campaign for social justice. Here are their options: to protest or leafletting. The high school students are supposed to teach middle school children about all of it. The environmentalist charter schools in LA, meanwhile, force students to write a breakup letter, break up with some form of oppression. Their options are toxic masculinity, heteronormativity, the Eurocentric curriculum, and the Dakota Access Pipeline. Those are just a few examples of things they have to write about. And as part of the ethnic studies, government schools all across the state are also teaching impressionable young children to write political manifestos, including a list of demands. One expert, California Policy Center President Will Swaim, said the scheme basically turns American exceptionalism upside down, painting America as exceptionally evil. It is remindful of re-education camps of Vietnam or China, he said. And this is from the guy himself. It's indoctrination rather than education. And interestingly, even leading tax-funded advocates of the subversion openly proclaim their goals. They don't hide it. Here's one quote: "I oftentimes think of ethnic studies as radical social action." It said Association for Ethnic Studies boss Julia Jordan Zachary, chair of the Department of African Studies at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. She went on to say, "It is education and knowledge that's produced to influence social change." With states across the country considering mandatory ethnic studies indoctrination of all children, it's past time for God-fearing patriotic citizens to recognize that the public school system is a threat, not just to children, but to American liberty. It is now a national security issue. That is some of the things our kids are facing. And we look, y'all can join me, come back in, but we look at the generation that's risen up, that has really been, that are really left. I'm not even talking liberal, I'm talking left, that are 30 down, really. And we see so much of that generation and the generation underneath it are so leftist, because this is what they're hearing, not only in the schools, but in colleges as well. So our kids are being brainwashed, and this is what we are producing. And you look outside and you see the effects of it, especially this year.
Sandy, I'd like to get Larry's take on this. Larry and I had talked about one of the reasons that I especially wanted to bring him in is because for the past few years here in North Carolina, the school that he's taught at is more of a rural type middle school and not like in a big city or anything. And he was expressing to me that the majority of the kids in the school were black. And so a lot of the things that you were just talking about, I'd like to hear if Larry has anything to say, about that. How did things work? I mean, I couldn't conceive of that. All the schools back, I graduated in 1972. I mean, we had blacks in the school, but they were such an extreme small minority that I just don't even know how to ask the question. So based on what she's talking about, how curriculums will kind of geared towards whites is what I heard in that. Would you like to respond to that, Larry? And how it went at the schools that you were at there, where it was dominantly black.
The curriculums that Sandy are talking about are being pushed by the teacher unions. In North Carolina, we do not have a teacher union. We have an association, and they act primarily just like unions, but they don't force like the rest of the unions do. As a teacher in North Carolina, I am a government employee, and it's illegal to have a union for government employees. With that said, though, the rural counties, the rural teachers, I would say the majority of the rural teachers come from the actual area that they teach in. And the majority of them are Christian. I think Sandy was talking about from the age of 30 down. That's where the danger is coming in, because these people have been educated in that system that has changed all these things. The agenda is in there in the history courses. The agenda is in there in even the readings in language arts. So I would challenge everybody that's listening to pray for those Christian teachers in the rural areas, because they're having to deal with this, and they have choices to make, whether they follow the curriculum or they continue to teach as they've taught all along. I decided as a teacher to continue teaching the stuff that I've been teaching for the last 30, 40 years. Whereas I've had under my wing new teachers that are Christian, and they don't realize what they're teaching is not necessarily what God wants them to reveal to the kids. And it takes the mature teachers like me to open their eyes to it. So I would challenge everybody to be praying for those teachers that are still in public schools that are Christian, that their eyes be open to what's going on, and that they take a stand against it. And I know job security is involved with it, but you can still get things across to your administration in the rural areas, because again, the rural areas, the majority of administrators and teachers are from that area there, and it's heavily influenced by the churches.
Well, now, Larry, you're from Cleveland, Ohio?
Yes. Yes.
Say hi to Joe, who is in Toledo. We call her Holy Toledo. And so what do you see as the difference of when you were teaching in Ohio than what it is down here in North Carolina? And how long have you been here in North Carolina?
I've been in North Carolina for 30 years now.
Yeah. So
I taught up north in a private school in Cleveland for 12 years. So I was not involved with the public schools there.
Okay, I get it.
Have you, go ahead.
Go ahead, say it. No, go, you go.
Have you noticed for yourself the change? Even, I know you said that they don't even have social studies teachers anymore, but have you seen the flip yourself in the textbooks and the inaccurate information that's now in there?
Definitely, yeah. And I've been on several textbook choosing committees, and I've made sure that my voice was heard in some of these things, because again, you have teachers that are put on those committees that don't know history or social studies, and yet they're choosing it based upon what the textbook companies offering in terms of online things and all the perks and stuff like that. They don't go for necessarily the content area. So I have definitely seen that. I would add to that I've seen a lot of textbook companies that have changed based upon being textbook companies for the South, knowing that we're in the Bible Belt. They have done a lot more in the last 20 years on discussing Israel as part of history, when before 20, 30 years ago, Israel was never spoken of in textbooks at all. The Phoenicians were talked about, but not Israel. And I've always taught that the Phoenicians and Israel were a combination there in the history department. But textbooks are trying to do that. Yeah. But again, the curriculum is being, the textbooks are being driven by those teacher unions. And y'all saw what the teacher unions were demanding in California in order to open schools again. And that's unfortunately across the board. Any NEA group of people, National Education Association, that's what they're driving for.
Can you say that? Can you tell us what they're driving for, so we can just state it again for the program?
Well, basically what you said was going on.
The ethnic studies and things like that.
The ethnic studies and the gender studies. Mm-hmm. I've not seen the whiteness criteria going on, because that's relatively new. That'll probably be coming out in the new textbooks. Textbooks are renewed every 5 years. So,
well, you can definitely see the whiteness agenda in every day on the news in our society. I mean, when you remove the statues, when you remove the history, because of every white man that was part of history, what have you just done? You're rewriting history.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the 1619 project that was put out by the New York Times, that's been floating around for, I think, 2 or 3 years now. And, you know, if you're a hip social studies teacher, you want to do the hip things, and that's what's in. But
I'll give a little heads up. The central element of the 1619 project is the claim that anti-Black racism, slavery, systemic oppression, and other evils are embedded in the very DNA of America. And of course, the DNA is evil, and there can be no change in policy and no possible transformation that would make the nation redeemable. Right. That's what that says.
Yeah. As a teacher, you know, going through what you went through, you know, educating children. Let's say I'm a mother of a child that still goes to public school. Is there anything any advice you could give to me to keep an eye on what my child what I should be looking for to help my child not get entrapped into this situation? If you understand my question.
Yeah, I understand. I watched one of the previous sessions, and one of the sessions was talking about, or I picked up this somewhere, that somebody was talking with people that were under communist rule for a long time, and what they were doing with their kids when they came home from school was to sit down and talk with the kids about what they had learned that day, and to put their 2 cents in and straighten things out. And I suggest that you do that. As a parent, get in communication with your teacher and find out, what was their religious background? What school did they go to? How they feel about things, because the curriculum in the colleges now are being turned around also, and that's where the kids are coming from. So anybody below 30 years old as a teacher, you need to check them out very carefully, and get involved definitely with the homework. Some teachers try to hide it by not giving any homework, and you need to talk with your student about what's going on in the classroom.
I had a couple of questions for you, Larry. As a teacher, if you're a teacher, how do you go against the curriculum and teach the truth? Or like you said, a mature teacher teaching the others, how would you encourage or teach the teacher to go against the grain?
Well, everybody knows that the curriculum is a gigantic thing. I mean, if you're having to teach history from the beginning of time to 1415, you can't cover everything. So I tell the student teachers and the new teachers, pick out what you're comfortable with and emphasize that, and give it the right slant. There was a time for like 10 years in which the big push in education was not to have a textbook as your Bible, let's say. Okay, don't use the textbook, bring in other things. And I try to explain that to the teachers, that's the way to do it. Bring in other things, because there's lots of stuff now. That's one of the good things about the internet. There's lots of pro-Christian, pro-God formats out there that you can bring into the classroom. You don't have to stick with that textbook. Don't make it your Bible, because you'll end up having to explain that, and you're not capable of doing that when you have a bad slant on it.
Very good. Mark.
Well, Sherry had a quick question. Sherry, go first, then I'm going to probably finish this off here.
I think it was Texas that had a problem with some online textbooks that some of the parents just happened to be there or something when they saw what was being taught, which was totally against actually what the Texas law said. How much of because like we look at our kids' textbooks to see what are you learning? What is that? Tell me, what do you think about this or whatever? And but this was a textbook that they didn't allow to go home. How much of a slant, or how much of that have you seen or know of that's been going on? Like they have a textbook only at school.
Again, the excuse is finances. You can only afford so many textbooks, so you only have one, and that was the situation for the last 15 years in my classroom. I only had one set of textbooks. They're left in the classroom. Kids don't have to take them home and get them damaged and brought back and have to pay for the damages and stuff like that. But I can see where that is being used as a close off the parent from knowing what's going on. And I didn't do that because I didn't use textbooks that much. I brought in other stuff, but I can see where it's being used like that. And that's why parents need to talk with their students, their children, about what's going on in the classroom. What's your assignment about? And most teachers have no problem explaining what's going on. I've had quite a few what I would consider annoying parents that want to know exactly what's going on. And it's like they wanted me to give them my lesson plans and stuff like that. And
Wow.
I had to explain to them, and I did it nicely, but, grumbled about it. But, that's what parents ought to be doing. We've had a lot of students that come from charter schools that they're no longer happy with the charter schools because they don't have sports and stuff like that, where our middle school had sports. So they would cut them off at the time when they could come to sports and come to our school. And those parents were really involved. These were the ones that would ask me for my lesson plans and stuff like that. So
I probably would have been one of those. I know.
one of those annoying parents.
Yeah, I would have been. Yeah.
Children can't defend themselves at a certain age unless you teach them, how to think, how to research things out, which is all part of life. So that's actually a life skill.
Exactly.
But that was, so the teachers want an authority. They're going to believe what they tell them, and then they go home and talk to somebody in higher authority like mom and dad or grandmother. And it's like, no, this is reality. And I had a friend that went to university. She said the Lord was sending her there, and she thought it was just to get an education, but it was to educate others. And she actually stood up in one of the classes and told the professor, "Why are you corrupting these young minds? I'm old. I've lived a lot of life, and that is not true."
Mm-hmm.
Called in the dean's office, but she didn't care. She said, "I know better." So
didn't they make a movie out of that? Oh, no. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sherry. What?
No, I said I should make a movie on her.
Yeah, really. Okay. Joe usually brings our homeschooling segment, and Sandi likes to usurp her every once in a while. But I got to change the intro there because Sandi, you've done a couple of them, and I like it when you bring that because you always enter new stuff in there. And Joe does too. And one of the times that Joe did the homeschooling segment and brought news into it was earlier on this year when everything was changing and they actually started the quarantine, and then everything changed in the school system. And one thing that Joe brought out that really kind of switched my mind, I hadn't thought of before, was there's a difference between someone who homeschools and someone who schools at home. And when they had to start switching it to the teachers, and everything went online, went virtual, that type of thing. First of all, I don't know if you had to do that or not because I don't know. But you understand what I'm saying is that I guess my question's more along the lines of would you consider teachers that teach in school to be good homeschooling teachers? In other words, it's a completely different, it's a whole different format. It's a whole different thing. And now that they've gone to a lot of schools doing virtual school, you have more of teachers schooling at home instead of homeschooling. You see what I'm saying? Do you understand my question? So what do you think of that format, what they're doing and how that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Oh.
I'm asking you, what do you think based on, the teachers having to do the virtual school and everything now? Did you have to do that at the end of the last school year?
At the end of the last school year, we had to do the programmed computer based, but we didn't have to do live stuff.
Okay, I see.
We were doing the last couple months that I spent this year, all the teachers were doing live stuff. And they had some kids in the classroom at the same time that they were doing live stuff. So all the kids were on that computer. And
what do you think of the virtual then, I guess is my question. In other words, where the kids are at home, they're on the computer, and the teacher is on like Zoom or whatever, that type of thing, versus actually being in class. What's your take on it?
I don't see any difference in it, except that it's like a captured audience. You don't have to have any classroom management skills other than checking out whether the kid's paying attention.
Okay. Okay.
And the students, I don't know. I think it's a negative thing because the students really don't have to pay attention. Like while you were asking that question, I was reading the little blurbs on the side here from Bob Hall and Tammy Wesley and stuff like that. And I wasn't attention. That's why I asked, are you asking me? So that goes on in the virtual classrooms all the time too.
I see. Okay. Interesting. Anybody else want to expound on that question or anything?
I just know that having a teacher piped into your house is not homeschooling.
No.
Homeschooling is very hands-on. The reason, I homeschooled for most of my son's education. I've told them, Larry, I put him back in, he was in private school through second grade. And then I homeschooled, and in junior high, in the first year of high school, I put him back in. He tested when he went in. They tested him as a junior in college is what he tested out. By the time he was in ninth grade back in that private school, he tested grade level. I pulled him out and finished homeschooling.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he went in and went ahead and he's done 4 years of college, et cetera. He ministers and things like that. And there's a whole bunch more of that. We're not getting into that right now, but,
yeah, the closest thing that I can say homeschooling is private tutoring that I do.
yeah, that's good.
One-on-one, you can have instant feedback, and you can really get to know the kid also, which, as a parent, you should get to know your son or daughter.
My sister wants to do that. The one that I said is a junior high math teacher. She said if there was a way to get out and do that, I would leave the public school system in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sherry, one quick thing.
My granddaughter does the distance learning, and I was asking my daughter about it, and she said, well, she loves sitting in her beanbag with her laptop learning. But the teacher in her English class has already expressed sadness that she's not actually in the class at school because she can add so much.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that kind of difference in that with them, so that it's got good points and bad points. And she also loves that she doesn't have to go to study hall. She can roam around the house or do whatever she wants. So, and she's healthier, actually. She's just healthier this year. She hadn't been sick at all. And I think last year she missed like 30 days or something. So she still keeps her grades up. So it's not an issue. And she always has her doctor's excuses. But so there's good points and bad points to all that. But one of them is, the participation. You can participate more if you're physically in the class than you can online, because sometimes she can't get the teacher's attention, and she doesn't like that because she likes class participation.
I just wanted to say thank you, Larry. You really informed us with a lot of things on your side of the coin, so to speak. And again, guys, government school, if they give you a computer, and I've stated this before, you've brought the government into your house, and that can lose your freedom in your own home, because they can see what's going on. Like y'all can see my background. You can see whoever doesn't have a green screen. So be careful.
I noticed you took the guns off the wall, Joe. So
yeah, I did, including my AR-15.
Water guns, Joe. They were just water guns. They just looked
my
real.
bazooka gun was back there. Right? But thank you, Larry, because there's so much, and I have some other questions that because I think
we could do a whole other show.
Yeah, because I have some questions I wrote down about, he does social studies. what exactly does that mean? But that's something for another day.
Yeah.
And this was really good. This was informative. And again, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Larry. Guys, Mark for finding Larry for coming in and blessing us. We really appreciate this.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, you're quite welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yes, we really enjoyed the information that you shared from a been there, done that position and exactly what's going on. It's really informative.
Yeah.
I would love
us to handle things more in our own homes.
You know what I would love?
Richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.